on Mental Health Matters. We want to remind you that we are here the second and fourth Thursday of every month at 11:30, where we will be taking up another subject. Believe it or not, our next subject, the second Thursday of October, will be about bullying. It's been noted that bullying is the second most common reason that people get out of public safety. So we're going to talk about that, but it affects all of us, young, old. So we also want to tell you about SC Thrive's mission. The mission of SC Thrive is to lead South Carolinians to stability by providing innovative and efficient access to quality of life resources. We are so fortunate today to have Terry Talley with us today. Terry is a counselor who owns Integrative Mental Health Solutions. Terry, would you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Sure. It's good to see you, George.
It's good to see you.
I went into private practice because as a former first responder, I have a firsthand experience of how PTSD really affects people and the obstacles that they're facing to get the help they need. And so my focus has really become to help people overcome those challenges, whether it's the stigma, whether it's access, or just having resources to not only feel better, but to also learn how to live better.
That's so huge. We want people to know. You look at this slide, you have no idea how many of these people are, what's going on in their lives. It's like a duck on the water. The duck looks fine on the water, but underneath they can be paddling like there's no tomorrow. We want you to know that anyone can develop PTSD. It doesn't matter their age, their race, their gender. It can happen to us all. And unfortunately, if you look just in the south region of the nation, there have been 20 natural disasters, actually 22 now, that have affected people, where one moment everything's fine and the next minute they have a hurricane coming through or whatever it may be. We deal with a lot of stats right now because of the pandemic and COVID. All of us wake up to the news of this many cases have been discovered this today, these many people have lost their lives today. And unfortunately, statistics in PTSD show that 6% of men and 5% of women in the nation are prone to post-traumatic stress. We also, it's about 8% between now and the end of the year, and then starting next year, 8% of our population will come down with some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD has become a subject. It became a subject years ago because of our veterans and the veterans that went off to foreign wars. We want you to know that PTSD can be treated. Terry, in this pandemic, people have many fears. What makes somebody more susceptible to PTSD than others?
What we're seeing in the research over, the past few years, as the research continues to increase around this area, is three common factors. We know that adverse childhood experiences can set someone up to be, predisposed to PTSD. We know that a lack of community, a lack of social connection also can set someone up for this. And then we also are recognizing that for whatever reason, the access to early intervention is also a real problem, whether it's because of the area we live in, the education of knowing what's available, the resources, money, whatever those challenges are, not having access to early intervention is also a contributing factor.
And this picture is really big. It's not what's wrong with us, it's what's happened to us. And you mentioned, South Carolina is such a large state. There's 46 counties. I've mentioned this before, that one of my wife's family members was autistic, but when I first came to know Buck, he was 65, 70 years old, and he lived in a rural part of South Carolina where there just wasn't the resources that we have now. You know, it's normal for people to feel on the edge. More people right now, Terry, as you know, more people right now are on the edge than ever. People are having trouble sleeping. I'm tired of seeing 3 o'clock in the morning. No matter what, I can't sleep through 3 o'clock. It's been longer than a few months, and you're still having symptoms. Well, you know, you hear on the TV, if you're still having symptoms, you may want to consult your physician. Well, the same thing goes for mental health issues. If you continue to have symptoms, it's time to get help. And, you know, we always, when something's going on, we always consider that it may be the worst thing. And how can someone open the door to mental health care, Terry?
Well, one of the first things I'd like to mention about that is the difference between mental health and mental illness. And as we're thinking about these clusters of symptoms and not being able to sleep and those kind of things, those are more mental health. It's more my nervous system is dysregulated. Something's happened and I haven't been able to process through it. So my mind is still really active and I can't shut it off. And we think about those resources as a mental health. I'm I'm just not healthy in this sense right now. And then we can start moving things in to help us sleep and help with these irritabilities. We can bring our bodies online and, self-care and rituals before bed and ways to really manage and get back in control of that. But if we're walking around thinking that this is a mental illness, it makes us feel powerless, like there's nothing we can do about it. So sometimes it's just starting with really understanding that, everything we're looking at on the screen right now of these symptoms is about just being unhealthy in this area and needing to be better. It's a well-being. It's a sense of well-being.
It is. And, and it's also a ripple effect. There, there are symptoms that, if, as you said, this morning I was supposed to go work out and I didn't work out. Well, I'm going to pay for that today. I'm not going to have the edge that I typically get when I work out. And so we have to look at, just as we do working out, having some quiet time, having some downtime before we hit the work world is big, because it affects our relationships at home. It affects our relationships at work. In our program last 2 weeks ago, we spoke about having that downtime between leaving work and getting home. And you mentioned having the downtime before we go to bed, and then when we go to bed. No two people have the same symptoms when it comes to mental health or central nervous system disorders. And this slide that we have now, it's so huge. It so relates to, the body and the central nervous system, because there are so many neurotransmitters and everything else. We talked about strategies. How do we keep Terry from digging a hole? How do we keep from falling into, the millions of dollars are poured into supplements and vitamins and everything else, and now there's commercials. Are you having trouble sleeping? Are you having trouble with this? If you just spend this money, this will make a difference. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I think a lot of times we get caught into the fear of this. And while the commercials and social media may be well intended to try to help resource people in some ways, oftentimes they create a more sense of fear in us about, this feels unmanageable, I'm out of control of this. And that can send us over that ledge, right? And then we feel hopeless and it's too big and I don't want to burden other people with these things. And it feels sometimes like treatment and interventions and well-being is this big construct. But in actuality, we know that if we can just start with some very fundamental pieces, very basic stuff, when we kind of laugh it off sometimes in the pop psychology world of, well, just breathe, or, these, go for a walk or exercise. But in reality, coming back into the sense of being connected with our own bodies, the very fundamental, being able just to be with ourselves for a little bit. will help start grounding us. And once we build one resource, it resources us to build bigger resources. And so those very fundamental pieces, I think we often overlook, but they're super important.
They are. When I first got into emergency medicine, I didn't know a lot about triggers. You know, in emergency medicine, we teach a lot about, and we're going to speak more to this later. We speak about checking boxes and doing this, but you know, my wife has asthma, and so there are things that will trigger an asthma attack in her. There are people that have epilepsy, and there are triggers that will cause epilepsy. There are all kinds of triggers, and unfortunately, there are triggers in mental health. I was on the phone with somebody yesterday, and I was having a pleasant day, and somebody mentioned something in a phone call, and it set off a trigger in me. We have to know that, as you said, it's a lot of this is the central nervous system, and that PTSD triggers are like neurological switches that turn on against our will. It's outside of our boundaries, and it's sort of part of our subconscious. And that once we identify what they are and how they happen, sometimes we can, there, you know, the body has a involuntary and involuntary side to it. And so sometimes we can try through counseling and through other things, we can help eliminate or lessen the number of times that that trigger goes off. One of the things that I don't like is crowds. This picture is what I like. This is me, that finding my happy place, and it's a way for me to be somewhere to avoid triggers. But it's also important, as we spoke earlier, that we need to try and work on those triggers and not avoid them, just as we're going to talk later about how we need to stay connected with people and not be off to ourselves all the time. You know, just as this fella may be at church, what are some other coping mechanisms and responses when somebody's overloaded and triggers are going off?
It's the idea of keeping a trigger in perspective. The reason there's a trigger to start with is because the nervous system has just conditioned. It's just been conditioned to respond to a certain thing. And sometimes we don't even have a mental awareness of why we're being triggered or activated, but our body and our nervous system is responding to a perceived threat. So if we can keep it in perspective that my body is activated or I feel triggered because of something, if we know that that was conditioned in, it gives us hope that we can recondition it to not do that. And so one of the beginning principles of working with triggers is just acknowledging that, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. This is a normal response to an abnormal situation. And right now, what do I need to be right now? So that keeps us from going down this shame spiral of something's wrong with me, I'm broken, I'm damaged, I'm never going to be able to function in normal society. And it also keeps us from going into this state of fear, which can, you know, bring on anxiety and panic for people. So it keeps us out of the bookends of fear and shame to right now, this is what I'm experiencing. Don't put meaning to it. But what do I need right this minute to be with this and work through it? And that's how we begin to get a pause in there and start renegotiating that trigger that was just conditioned in under a previous experience.
And that's a great way to explain it, that you know, just as our, for instance, we look at the people in California and all that they've lost because of wildfires. We look at people in Texas and Louisiana who have found themselves in a different condition now. There's a friend told me of someone that they know of in Charleston, and anytime that there becomes any thought of a hurricane coming close to Charleston, because they were in Hugo, you know, when things start coming up, he packs up and moves straight to Columbia. So the threat may not actually be there for Charleston, but because of it, because of that trigger, he makes a move. And, you know, we have to keep from putting up walls. We have to recognize that a lot of this can affect our trust in people, our closeness, our communication. It can make us feel irritable, on guard, jumpy, worried. You know, it's a vicious cycle, and it's a negative cycle. And these symptoms, they cause loved ones to respond in negative ways. And sometimes, unfortunately, and it's happened in my life that, you know, um, my family may not have done anything, but because of something that I was involved in at work or whatever, a call that I ran, whatever, you know, triggers gone off, and it's not a good thing. And we often, as I said before, we think of the worst. So when that spouse, when that family says, you know, we really need to talk to dad, or we really need to talk to mom, you know, how does that discussion begin?
It begins with the family having an understanding that sometimes individuals who are struggling with post-traumatic stress, they don't realize how much they're struggling. They don't they don't hear the raised voice. They don't hear the frustration in their own voice. They don't feel the I'm more hypervigilant than I was a year ago. Because for most people, post-traumatic stress is this very slow spiral. It doesn't just I don't just wake up tomorrow and there's this full-blown checklist of criteria that now says I have post-traumatic stress. It comes in increments. And so it's almost like people are desensitized to the process within their self. And if caregivers and loved ones know that we're going to go talk to mom or we're going to go talk to dad, and they may not be aware or they're not seeing the same things that we're seeing, it's easier for those people not to take it personal, that they're not angry at me, they're not avoiding me. And we know that avoidance is a hallmark of, post-traumatic stress. We're in denial about it, we're avoiding handling the issue. And so when people bring it to our attention, the reflex is to try to move into a place of avoidance. And if caregivers and people want to help, them being resourced in the dynamic that this isn't personal, the person may not even be aware of it within their self. They may just think, oh, I'm tired, or yeah, it's been a hard year or something, but they don't see it as an interpersonal piece just yet. And so coming in with that knowledge disarms both sides. So no one's feeling defensive, because the intention there is to really get the help to those people that we love.
And we spoke about social media, and we talked about the internet. And there is nothing that a clinician wants to hear less of than for somebody to come in and say, well, I Googled what's going on, and Google says da da da. Well, as you said, Google might give you, well, do you have these symptoms? And you're checking the boxes,
Yeah.
but it's not about that. And when in emergency medicine, comorbidity, two terms weren't in my vocabulary: self-care and comorbidity. I never thought about comorbidity, but now we're hearing more about comorbidity, especially with the pandemic, because people have existing situations, medical conditions, and the pandemic may make that worse. But can you say a little bit more can you speak just a little bit more about comorbidity?
Yeah, when we think about this, it gets messy, because PTSD within itself can present so many different ways. Grief is often misdiagnosed as PTSD. We have other, personality things or just temporary circumstances that can be added in addition to PTSD. You have this, this, and this. And I think we run a risk when we're not careful and getting professional help on making those diagnoses about comorbid type issues, because when we start putting labels on people, we lose people. We lose their humanness. We lose the unique experience of how PTS is presenting to them. We don't honor their lived experience in that. And we just start doing a checklist and a cookie cutter type treatment intervention. which doesn't work for most people because we all are coming into this journey with a different lived experience. And so when we start trying to differentiate between, does my person I love have PTSD and this or this, and we're using Dr. Google to make those decisions for us, and we're just trying to whatever's in the latest magazine or the latest buzzword, we can really create more stigma and create more hindrances to people because we're adding labels and we're just not honoring their experience and their personal unique struggles. So I always encourage people to try to get the professional help of the person to resource you, to resource your person when we're dealing with these comorbidity and PTSD and grief and these types of things that can very much overlap and present similar to each other.
It can. We did a forum on everybody learns differently. And in that segment, we did an awesome thing on linear versus nonlinear. And it just really opened up what you said, that so many times we have a checklist. It's like when a pilot gets behind the wheel of an airplane, there's a checklist for them to go through. When I, as a paramedic, get handed the keys to my ambulance, there's a checklist for me to go through. But as a person, I may not go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as a learner, I may not go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And somebody that's going through some type of mental health situation or a central nervous trigger, they're not going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It takes an understanding. It takes a support system. This picture is an example of a support system. And as we said before, everybody may seem happy in this picture, but underneath, we don't know what they're fighting at home. We don't know what they may be fighting at work. They may be agreeing to something that they don't necessarily agree to. And we have to remember that our loved ones are at home and that they're some of the most important people in our lives. And but we need their support. And earlier we spoke about always having a go-to person. We've spoken about that throughout our Mental Health Matters series, about how important it is to have a go-to person. And if there's one word that has become concrete in this whole Mental Health Matters program, is hope, that we can't give up hope. I do want to remind everybody on our audience today, I do want to remind you about our chat feature in Zoom. Please, we invite your questions, we invite your comments. Please take a moment to ask or comment on something. But Terry, when we talk about friend support and we talk about family support, what does that look like?
For friends and family, I think it's important for them to know that it's okay not to know. It's okay to not have the perfect answers, the perfect solution, the perfect magic fix for something. And if someone that they love or care about or know at work, they're struggling and they reach out, I don't have to have all the answers. It's my presence and my willingness to be there and say, hey, you know what? I don't have all the answers. And a lot of first responders, they feel like if they don't have the answers because they're rescuers and fixers, that they're failures. So then they start pulling back at wanting to help because it feels like a burden and too much for them. But the idea is that it's really okay not to have all the answers, and to say that to the person you care about. Like, I'm here. What can I do for you right now? What do you need most right now? Because I don't know the right thing to say. And so when we can do that and give ourselves a little bit of space, that we don't have to perform for someone, that the healing happens in the presence of being seen in our pain by another person and being able to share that with someone. It's okay to tell people that you love that are struggling, you know what? I don't know what to say right now, but I want to be with you and I want to help you get what you need. What can I do for you? What can I do right now?
I I teach EMT students, and when I'm teaching them to be good providers, I speak about when we walk in the door. I'm 6'6", 300 pounds. When I walk into somebody's house and they've called 911 and they may weigh 100 and some pounds soaking wet, I'm an intimidating figure. And so, I need to ask permission. Hi, how are you? I'm George. I'm here to help you. Can I take your pulse? Can I listen to your lungs? Can I check the temperature of your skin? And you spoke about how important it is for us to give permission to our clinician to ask those hard questions, to talk to each other. And as you said, um, the last thing that my body wants me to say to somebody that comes to me is, I don't know. I don't know what to do, because we have this stigma that not only is it not good to ask for help, but there's this stigma of I've always got to have an answer.
That's right.
And when I don't have an answer, then automatically I'm beating myself up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I think that Terry, one of the things that uh, when we talk about journaling, when we talk about things that we can do in our lives, um, what are some other things that we can do that encourage success?
One of the things I've noticed about individuals struggling with any kind of post-traumatic stress is they lose their self. They lose the things they enjoyed doing at one time, the things that just made them happy, just gave them a sense of, you know what, things are crazy right now, but I'm okay. They forget that at some point in life there was something that they enjoyed other than work, other than the chaos, other than those things. They're still a part of them. And I find that as we start trying to move people into feeling better and living better, bringing those things back in, it's super beneficial. It's the idea of maybe I enjoyed music, maybe I enjoyed fishing or singing to the radio in my car or pottery, or it's those things that I just enjoy. But there's something about these types of careers and the things that bring on this kind of stress, whether it's a one-time incident or a major disaster, we lose ourselves into that. And it just has a way of robbing us of the things that bring us joy. So sometimes it's just about, can you help a person find something that they actually enjoyed doing and resourcing them to do that thing, regardless of how small it is. A lot of the things we see now, these words, coping skills and self-care and mindfulness and all these things, they're kind of mysterious. We don't really know what they mean and they're kind of vague, but the bottom line is the things we enjoy that we've lost connection with, if we can start putting those back in our life, we're going to notice a little bit of space in that nervous system, a little bit of joy, a little bit of okayness. And then that is seeds to grow into feeling better.
It is. And, you know, the presentation that we have today is full of pictures. And I was fortunate this past weekend to have a little bit of a read into Ansel Adams' life. He wrote an autobiography, and we know Ansel Adams for photography, but we had no idea. I had no idea that he was such an accomplished pianist. And music is a big thing. And as you said, if we look in the left upper corner of this picture, we see somebody journaling, and journaling can be big to what you said earlier, that we may find ourselves in a really tough place right now, but our journals can help us look back to times that we were in a tough place and we got through it. Believe it or not, this morning, even as I was preparing for this, I got a phone call from a friend who said, "Hey George, I've got somebody that's having a really hard time, and they don't know who to reach out to." So Terry, when somebody is in the workplace and they're having a tough time, what is a, not necessarily a secret to success, but the things that we hear about EAPs and other outlets, can you speak to that?
Yeah, the workplace is still tricky. And depending on what your workplace is, it can make it even more complicated. If you're in a job that you work with a partner, you're a first responder, you're a medical professional, you know, and other things where people are depending on you to pull your weight, to cover them, to be part of a team, there becomes this fear that if I reach out for help because I am struggling with some kind of post-traumatic stress, someone is going to think that I'm not reliable, that I can't carry my weight, that I'm not going to show up, or maybe you don't have that work environment, but you have task oriented where you're worried about a supervisor thinking, oh, they're going to think I can't do my job. And we fall into this stigma and we fall into this fear again about I can't reach out because there's going to be repercussions about my reputation, my integrity, my work ethic, my mental state. And so when people start talking to me about I need help at work, I encourage them to find someone outside of work to encourage them to move towards those things in work. So who's a friend who's done something like this before within their work system, who can help navigate you through your HR, and who can support you and almost hold you accountable for making that phone call, having that conversation, getting resources to what your rights are in your workplace and what does your workplace offer you to help with these things. And a lot of people are surprised that some workplaces do have things in place for these matters. And so having someone who's outside of work can ease the intimidation of stepping into me advocating for myself to be able to do my job better, because most times this is temporary. Post-traumatic stress is not a forever thing for everybody. A lot of times it's a very temporary circumstance, and when you get resourced, you move through it and you don't need that extra help anymore. But until then, it's about having someone to encourage you and hold you accountable for moving through the obstacles of the workplace to get the help you need.
And we, Eva, we've been on now for a little bit. Are there any questions or comments that?
Yes. Vonda asked, how does this look as far as peer support? And is it the same as friends and family? Being an accountability buddy.
I think it could be peer support. I think it doesn't have to be. You know, we don't always want someone that's in the same profession that we have. And it could be friends and family. It's someone, if you think about your side mirrors on your car, it's someone who's going to help you see the things you can kind of get a glimpse of, but you can't see fully. It's that person that you trust to say, I'm going to HR tomorrow. I'm scared. I'm nervous. I don't know what's going to happen. And whether it's a peer support or a friend or a therapist or a mentor, a coach that can say, okay, so I'm going to call you tomorrow and find out how it goes. Because a lot of times our fear about these things will lessen if we have an idea of when we're going to be okay. So I know I have this appointment with HR at 2, but at 3, my friend's going to call me and I'm going to have somebody there to catch me and help me navigate this. And so I don't know that there's a real criteria other than asking someone to be that person for you. And that's someone that you can trust to kind of call you and say, hey, did you do it? Okay, what do you need today? You've got that appointment with your supervisor, or you're going to ask for more time on this project, or just someone there to keep you motivated and accountable to moving through it.
Thank you. What is the difference between PTSD and complex PTSD?
So our language has been changing, as all things do. We're moving into teasing out the differences, the way that different post-traumatic stress comes together, how it's categorized, and these things. So we're getting better language. So the more we know, we're doing better. And we typically think about PTSD as a single event, a car wreck, a hurricane, you know, something that's more of a single incident. Where we think about complex PTSD as something that is long-term, It's recurring. It is multiple things over and over. Underneath the complex PTSD, we're looking at developmental pieces like through childhood, adverse childhood experiences. And so we're looking at long-term recurring. So then we add the word complex to it because it's not just one piece. And if something's going on for years and years or it's recurring, we know that because of the time length, it's hitting different developmental pieces of our life. It's hitting different stages of our resources. And I mean, we're all resource different at 30 than we are at 10. So if we have this ongoing trauma, it's hitting different seasons. So we add the word complex to cue into the fact that this is not just a single thing or a one-time event or just this one season of life. It's long-term, it's recurring for us.
Thank you.
And as you said about long-term or recurring, we know, and we've spoken about this in our forums, that physical and mental or internal, there's a relationship there that, for instance, if my foot hurts and the longer I wait to get help for my foot or my back, the worse it's going to get. And so if I call for an appointment, you know, I may not get an appointment for 30, 45 days. And so when we first start to have those pieces where we want to be alone, where we don't want to talk to our family, where we're, for instance, as you said earlier, it's not till we step out that we actually may see what's going on with ourselves. And that's so much in public safety because we get that call, we jump in the vehicle, we're with that crew member. We're hoping that our crew member has our six. Our crew member hopes that we have their six. And when we talk about their six, we're talking about their back. So then we jump out at a call. And when we jump out at a call, life stops. And we're just in that moment of making a difference, doing the rescue, doing what needs to be done. And then it's not till after that response, when we get to the person to the hospital or wherever it may be, that all of a sudden we have that time to step back and just how important it is. But the main point I'm trying to get to here is that we need to reach out to that clinician early, because when we do reach out outside of our workplace for help, we may get that answer, well, we can see you next week, or we can see you the week after that. That the expectation somebody has that there's going to be a quick fix, it's just not there. And that's why it's so important, as you said, for us to have an accountability person, somebody to hold us accountable and say, did you, can you, when are you, and then when you finally have that conversation, keep it together. One last thing is we have to be cognizant of the fact that the people around us, we need to keep them close, because sometimes it's easy for us, when somebody's reaching out to us, it's easy for us to see Tom's on the phone and we go, oh no, it's Tom again. What do I tell him? Can I call you back later? Or do I talk to him now? Do I really want to have that conversation? What else, Terry, do you think is so important about that relationship between the person and their provider?
Well, that person becomes the caregiver. They become in the same role that a lot of people who develop post-traumatic stress are in. They're out there taking care of other people. And so now if I'm the person taking care of the person who's struggling with some PTSD stuff, now I'm in the role of a caregiver. And the idea there is the same as it is with a person struggling with PTSD. It's staying resourced. It's knowing your limits and knowing your boundaries. And, I can't drop this right now. Can we talk later this afternoon? Or, maybe my friend is going through a really hard season because they're doing a lot of things, or there's a lot of triggers, or it's an anniversary of something, or, whatever. It seems a little heavier right now. So then if I'm going to be there for that person, how do I self-care myself to take care of someone else? The roles are no different there. it's still the idea that I have to stay resourced when I want to care for someone who's struggling, regardless of what they're struggling with. I still have to keep my tank full. And there's no shame or selfishness in that, because we can't give what we don't have. And so we want to think about staying full so that I can be there for the other person, and resourced well also, so that I have that availability and mental energy and, capacity to hold space with another person.
You're seeing some resources that are available to do just what Terry's talking about, to help fill our cup. As I told you about, all of us, no two people are going to have the same susceptibilities as the other person. There's different ways that we keep our cups full. These are some apps that the VA has. I encourage you, when you're going to select an app, that you read a little bit more into it before you hit that button. Remember that these are free apps, but remember that some apps aren't free, and that you have to realize that sometimes that app that you just paid for, you're never going to get that money back, and it may be the thing that doesn't work for you. Terry, we spoke about how a person that's reaching out for help, that they have to understand that just if I'm having problems with my back, I'm not going to go to a dermatologist. And the same thing bodes for clinical support when we talk to mental health, that it's not one size fits all, and that different clinicians can handle different situations. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, I think it's a general assumption. Of course, this is a very broad brushstroke, but I think most people are under the assumption that all therapists are the same. So no matter who I go down the list and set up an appointment with, it doesn't matter, because they're all going to do the exact same thing. And while there's a criteria for obtaining a license and the legal rights to practice as a clinician, those are standards, so to speak. All clinicians are not the same. And I think that's so important for people to have an awareness that just because this therapist doesn't work does not mean that another one will not work. Because while we hold licensure that's similar, we all practice differently. We have a different natural skill set. We all view PTSD differently. We all take different trainings to, build our toolboxes. And just because I have a training doesn't mean you would have that training, even though we might both be licensed just the same. And so it's important for people to know that all therapists are not the same, and you have options, and not to be discouraged if it takes more than one try to find that right fit, because there is a right fit. But losing patience and losing hope, or not really understanding that they're not all the same. We're not cookie cutter. We all do things different. We have different personalities. We have different skills. We have different belief systems. We call that theoretical orientation. That's the big word for it, right? We all look at things differently in theory, and that's how we practice. So really encourage people to, know that if the first one's not the fit, or the fifth one isn't the fit, it doesn't mean that there's not a fit. It just means you haven't landed in the right space just yet.
And, we teach a course called Mental Health First Aid, and we have a gripping video when we're teaching public safety, and it's of a police officer that was shot in the line of duty and survived the incident. And she said, I went through 10 different clinicians before I finally found the right one. And that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of resilience to keep moving forward, to know that, it's just like other things in our lives. We're looking for a particular one, and sometimes we don't need to settle for second best. That we have to realize that that there is hope, and there is somebody out there is the right fit for us. But that we have to remember at the end of the day, just like in public safety, when we walk out of the door in public safety and we go to care for people, we have to remember that unfortunately, sometimes we're caring for people that aren't going to go home. And so we need to remember that the people that are at home waiting on us, that they rely on us, and that we need to make sure that we're doing everything to keep our tank full because they're relying on us. We want to hear from y'all. Please, if you will go to this link and take the survey, it will help us so we can meet your needs and get some resources to you. I really, Terry, is there, before we go, are there some other tips or conversation that you'd like to have before we go?
I'd like to encourage people to really question when they do seek help. Talk to the therapist, question that person. If you're going to trust someone with your mental well-being, there are things that you want to know, and just know that you have permission to ask those hard questions of that clinician. You know, how do you work? And if I get here and we're 5 sessions in and it doesn't feel like a good fit, what are my options? And, you know, what is your practice if it's not working? And you're looking for a clinician that's going to help you get to the right place. And if it's not them, can they help you? Can they refer you to someone else that will be a better fit? And ask around. If it's been done one time, it can be done again. So if one person has ever felt better in the face of post-traumatic stress, that means you can too. Ask people, who are you seeing? Who do you know that knows someone that works in this area that I need? Walk in with a list on your first session. This is what I need from you. I need to know, I need you to be super straightforward, or I need you to be gentle, or I need you to allow my family to be here, or I need this. And get to know your clinician, that person that you're going to trust to journey with you, that they're going to meet your needs up front, that you know that we're on the same page. This is what I believe. This is how I view PTSD. Yes, I think you can get better. No, I think this is a lifelong thing. You want to make sure that your scene is safe in there, right? You want to know that when you come back in there, you're safe. And while you may not trust that person, at least you know that you're safe because you're at least on the same page in the things that matter to you. So just really encourage people as you take those steps and you're trying to resource your loved ones to make sure that that therapist is going to be able to meet your needs. And don't be shy about it. And if you get in there and you're like, okay, you're not the right one, you know what I need now, can you refer me to someone else? A good clinician is going to say, yes, let me help you I can't do those needs for you for whatever reason. Maybe I don't have the same mindset or the training or whatever, but hey, I know a guy, right? And so use the network, use the connection, and advocate for yourself in the presence of that clinician to really get what you need.
And just as it's hard for somebody to knock on that door when they're having trouble, it is just as hard for somebody that has knocked on that door and come out of the valley to give their testimony.
Yeah.
Because you know, myself, I had to get used to telling people my story. I had a dear friend, and he wore a hat that said, "I love to tell the story," and he reached out to people in the community. He did so many things for people. So, you know, I love to tell the story that, you know, 30 some years of being an EMS, and raising 2 kids and going through life, there's a reason I'm still here, and there's a reason that I got a smile on my face and we're having a conversation today. So we need to be able to tell that story. And as you said, say, hey, I know somebody. Or as we talked about earlier, when we see somebody that's not being themselves, that they may look a little disheveled, that they may be down, or they may be making comments that are close-ended, that can be a big issue. Terry, we're so thankful to have you today. We hope you'll come back. Um, Everyone, I want to thank you for being here today. Eva, I want to check with you real quick, see if there's any other questions or comments before we dash out of here.
No, sir, they are not. I just want to let everybody know that the link for the survey is in the chat. So if you would go ahead and click on that and let us know how you feel about today's session and what we can do to make it different. We enjoyed having you. Terry, thank you for being with us today.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
We want to remind everybody, the next slide shows our contact center number. We want you to know that SC Thrive has a contact number for you may be experiencing financial issues. For instance, right now it's September 23rd, and we have 7 more days, a little bit less because they're working days, to help people sustain the roof over their head if they're a renter in an apartment or another environment. We also want to remind you that we will be back 2 weeks from today. The second Thursday of next month, we'll be here and we'll be talking about bullying. Thank you all again. Have a great day.